Okay, welcome back. So today we're going to continue our series on modifying the Leatherman Wave, and today we're going to do this. We're going to show you how to take a Sawzall blade, modify just the blade, and then get it to lock in properly with the Leatherman Wave. This is surprisingly good. In fact, it kind of surprises me we don't see more of this very simple modification. Everything locked in perfectly with some practice. So I want to talk about that. We'll go through all the tools you need. We'll talk about mistakes you might make. But this is going to be a cool one. So stay tuned and let's get right to it. All right, serious talk here before we get started on gear for the Dremel tool. Before you even bother to consider doing this modification, you are going to need a full face shield. No exceptions to the rule. While I was doing this, I had sparks flying in my face constantly. You are using a cutting wheel, which can also break off on hardened steel. You are 100% going to need something like this. If you don't have one, you're taking a major risk with your eyes. Don't mess around. I've had a corneal abrasion. It was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. And on top of that, that's not enough of a reason. It was $2,000 between 2 emergency room visits and having someone with a Dremel tool cut up my cornea to fix it. Okay, wear it. It makes sense. Now let's get right back to it. All right, so here's the good news about the Dremel tool and so on. The Dremel tool, the actual component, is less important than the abrasives themselves. You do not want to skimp on the abrasives. You can get an inexpensive, cheap Dremel tool, but do not skimp on the abrasives. You will be very sorry about that. And the good news is I did a lot of research about this. I looked for all the different kits and seeing what made the most sense, and there was only one kit, and it was not an expensive one. So this model, let's see, this is the 26100355589. I will put all of this in the description, don't worry about it. But here's the crazy part. This does not have a single item in the package that I haven't used myself. And actually, I really wish I had found this before. I probably would have saved $50 at least. This single wheel alone was $20 independently. This is a great value. In fact, it's $20 cheaper on Amazon than it was at Home Depot, which really surprised me. Usually that's not the case. So I put a link to this in the description, and this is the only thing you're going to need for this particular modification. There will be 3 additional items for modifications down the road. But for this, it's it. It's just a cutting wheel and a disc. You can just get that if you want, but this has a bunch of other useful features that we're going to use in future modifications. So this actually makes financial sense if you're planning on doing this. So let's go ahead and move on from there. Okay, so before we show you how to do the modification, we need to really talk about a couple of important things relating to doing this modification first. So it worked better than I expected. So let's go ahead and pull this out. The dimension of all of these saws works perfectly in the slot for the lanyard ring / pocket clip. It's almost snug. As you can see, the paint kind of coming off. It's perfect. It's just nice and snug. All of these function. You can set up any Sawzall blade you want. You can cut them down to length. You can do all kinds of cool things. One thing I want to mention though, because I initially thought, you know what, this would be great for the Leatherman Wave, but it's probably also good for other tools. So I went ahead and I tried to pull out my Leatherman Surge and see if it worked there. Does not work. We're going to have to do a separate video where we actually modify one of these specifically designed to fit the Surge if we choose to. So that's going to be for a different video. You will not be able to take this and then have it fit properly in the surge, unfortunately. I'm not sure quite yet why, but I should mention that. Also, there's a possibility, and I can't confirm just yet, but there's a possibility this may or may not work for the charge. Actually, give me a minute. Whoops, turns out I do have a charge. Let's go ahead and try that just for a second. So let's see if it's any different from the Leatherman Wave. Uh-oh. I think the answer to this question is yes. Yes. Okay, so important to note, because in the charge there is a disc that is a little bit different than in the Wave, we're going to have to also do a separate series for the charge. So as of right now, until I confirm how, this will only work for the Wave. This is very important. Now, you can modify any of these saws to fit independently with any of the other models, whether it's the Surge or the Charge. I'm fairly confident you can do that. I was able to make a couple alterations to this one. It's so that it did work with the Surge, but it's still iffy. It doesn't quite work perfectly, and I would very much like to come back and figure it out in a better way down the line. It just doesn't feel secure enough for my liking. Now, down the line, I think that we'll come back to this and we'll figure it out. But for now, you can see how it actually moves with the this piece of metal. That's not ideal. So we're going to have to do that as a separate video with both of these. Now, let's go ahead and talk about what you're going to need. So on top of the saw blades, you're going to, of course, need your Leatherman Wave. You're going to need the bits like we talked about over here, and the Dremel tool kit like this. But basically, all you really need is a metal cutting wheel. And I do highly recommend these interchangeable kits. They make things much, much easier. I haven't had a single one shatter on me, knock on wood, but really they work excellently. So a couple of the things you're going to need. You're going to need a lanyard ring, one of the lanyard rings from the kits, like so. And this is going to give you basically what is a template. It's going to give you a template that you're going to use. You're also going to need a fine tip Sharpie. The finer the better. It's going to need to be able to write on it, but the smaller that tip, the easier it's going to be for the process that I'm going to show you at the end of this video. I had to do quite a bit of practice to kind of find a technique that seems to work really well for this. This was the last one I made, and it felt very easy in comparison to the first one I made. And I feel like I can finally say that I have something in which to show you guys. Now this locks in better than any of the other saws I have. In fact, there's no up and down play whatsoever. And now I have access to a thin metal hacksaw. Now this 6-inch blade is not going to fit inside a sheath. Somebody asked, well, what about putting in a sheath? Well, what I did was take one of these 6-inch blades. First, I cut it to the length I knew I could fit in my sheath, like so. And then now it closes, right? So that's what I ended up doing. Now, why would you do this and only have a little bit excess saw? Well, if you look at the saw on the Leatherman Wave, you will notice that this is still between a half and a full inch more cutting edge. That's pretty substantial. And imagine this being the hacksaw blade. If I did the same thing to the hacksaw blade, that's a completely different type of saw that I don't have access to. So there's a lot of reasons why you might consider it. Now, this is one of the reasons why people really like the Leatherman Surge, because it has a T-shanked adapter, and you can actually buy additional T-shanks that will fit with this, and then you have a much more complete package. This gives you the same functionality, but maybe even better because you get to use these huge, monstrous blades. And I was able to test this, and it cuts pretty good. It cuts pretty good. So, with that being said, there is an order in which you want to do this. So we're going to I want to try my best to explain it step by step. I will speed up some of the parts of the modification itself, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to do one more 6-inch metal saw, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do this saw and get it locked into the Leatherman wave. So we're not going to copy this directly. We're going to show you how you would do it if it was the very first saw you did. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so here we got our blade. We're going to go ahead and stick it in this mount. Now this is the same mount I talked about in one of my initial videos. I will also be putting a link to this. There's a whole shopping list from stuff that I got on Amazon down below. You can just go through that, and it's going to include all of the items, including the Dremel tool and so on and so forth. So with this kit, before I mess around with marking it, I'm just going to go ahead and cut this part off from here to here. So you can see just how fast we're going to go through it. So if I sound muffled, it's because I'm putting the face shield down, and you guys can see just how fast this cuts through. See what I mean? This is no joke. This thing rips through the metal very fast, but also I hope you guys can see how many sparks are coming off this thing. Now, at some point in this process, I'm going to get my face up close and personal with this because I want to make sure I'm doing it as accurately as possible. I could not do that without that face shield. Okay, so here's the part where we're going to go ahead and mark it. So what we're going to do is we're going to extend this out a little bit more so we get access to it. And I hope you guys can see what I'm doing. So for this, I'm not going to get all that complicated about angles. So if you look, the width of a Sawzall is very similar to the width you need for this tool. So we're actually going to utilize that to our best advantage. And I'm actually going to pin it, and I'm actually going to trace the inside lines. I'm going to trace that little shelf on the outside. Little cutout. Come around. I'm just doing this for your benefit because I don't technically need to color all of this. And that's it. I'll get out of the way, get it up close and personal so you can see. Now, here's the thing. After trial and error, I was able to figure out the right order in which to do this. And also, I found that I was making my life much harder in the past by not lining it up with this side right here. So as you can see, what we're going to do is we're going to remove the inside, and that's really the most important thing. So you'll see how I do that, and then we'll talk again after that. Important note here, I'm not trying to make that curvature. I'm actually going to make a rectangular cut. I found that all that really matters is that the pivot stops at a given point, and it's actually much easier to control everything if I just cut in straight lines. So I'll show you how I do that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so from here, it's kind of important. Sorry about that. The next step is I want to cut some of this shelf. I know this is going to get a little complicated, but I want to leave as much of this metal as I can. And we're not going to cut the notch till the very end. All right, what happened? I lost the rest of that video. So, we are going to do this again. Rapid fire, in the rain. And hopefully, we can showcase what it is I needed to show you, because the last part of the steps, they're kind of important. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Okay, I think this is basically at the point that we were before. Now, the next couple steps are really important, so I do not want you to miss what I'm doing here. So the next step I need to do is I need to remove some of this component here. And what this is going to do is create a stop point. That stop point is what we're going to build the rest of it around. So we're not going to cut the notch till the very end, and you'll see hopefully why. All right, now that we've cut that notch, now that we've cut the notch, we're going to start pulling in the Leatherman. I've done this enough now that I got a pretty good sense of whether I can get it in there or not. And it looks like I just need to, let's see. Let's take a look. Not quite wide enough. Put it back to the inside. Okay, let me take this out and take a look. Get it all the way in. So you can see here, that stop point that I created is now coming in contact with the frame. This is really important. So I'm not going to play with the back anymore. Now notice the back was really long. It's sitting under this file. It's a lovely day out here, by the way. But it's okay. Raincoat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the fine end of this. I'm going to go ahead and mark inside the frame. So I'm going to take this spot and I'm actually going to mark it in that spot so I can see where that point is. You can use a scribe if you want. This will work just fine. Alright. It's one of those days. Alright. So now you can see. Whoops. Oh, this is fun. Alright. Now, this is the part where we want to be careful. What we want to do is we don't mind cutting more towards the blade. We want to avoid cutting close to this edge as much as possible. It's better to come back and cut a little bit more towards the end down the line. That'll make a much stronger lockup. So we're going to cut more towards the bladed side first. And I'm going to do this in my hand. may not seem like a lot of metal here, but it's more than enough. So let's go ahead and try it. It is like torrential downpour out here right now. There we go. Not quite wide enough. We need to go a little bit wider, but we're almost there. This face shield has water running down my back. Oh man, that's funny. There we go. Now it's solid. So now we have the lock. And the last thing we want to do, the only last thing we need to do here, how did I get that? The pin. There you go. Get in there. Alright, last thing we need to do here is you'll see there's a little piece of metal sticking up. We're just going to quickly cut that down. That's it. There you go. All done. Rock solid lockup. And that's what it looks like. Lovely Sawzall we are having today. Yes. But this was still fun. This face shield had the water running down the back of my neck. That was hysterical. There's going to be tons of questions relating to this process, and I don't have a problem with that. Feel free to leave them down in the comments. But please, if you do this, wear a face shield. It's going to make it much more enjoyable. It's also going to be a lot safer. Okay? Okay, so this ended up working out better than I could have expected. But I also learned a lot on how to do it properly. So it is going to be a trial and error. So the last thing I want to say about this is that if you do mess up, do not worry about it, because all you do have to do is cut a straight line down on the saw and start all over again. You can simply cut out the same shape over and over again, and eventually the saw will be a little shorter, but that's not a big deal. So you can actually practice on a single saw and then decide to spend your time on something expensive. You don't have to necessarily use an expensive saw the first time around. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put it down in the description. I will try to get to them and answer them as best I can. All of the gear, all the stuff that I used, if it's available on Amazon, will be part of the shopping list down below. I don't think you should have to buy those things. I don't want you to feel compelled. They're mostly there for you to know what I've been using. So there's a Dremel tool there, for instance. Don't recommend buying Dremel tools on Amazon. They're way more expensive than they are in other places. However, the kit that we showed earlier, that is significantly cheaper right now on Amazon. So keep an eye out for those things and check before you buy. Okay? Thanks for stopping in. It was a lot of fun. And don't worry, we're going to be back before we destroy the warranty on this Leatherman Wave and doing a whole bunch more stuff. I have a lot of things planned. It feels like this is becoming like maybe a 10 or 12 video series versus a 6 to 8 video series. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping in. I'll see you next week, Friday again at 2 p.m. So take care. Talk again soon.